Hello, this is Shiri Klima, the Deputy City Manager. I'm presenting today on the schedule for weaning off of Measure O. The recommendation is that the Measure O Citizen Oversight Committee recommend to the City Council a Measure O weaning schedule. As you may recall, in January of 2020, the Oversight Committee recommended to the Council to start the weaning process. And by weaning, we mean here implementing savings, reabsorptions into the general fund, reductions, and if necessary, cuts to programs. The purposes of weaning at that time were twofold. One, to ensure the city can cover the debt payments that are due past the sales tax sunset, and two, to reabsorb all ongoing programs gradually. In July of 2021, staff explained that the COVID-related recession impacted the Measure O revenue much less than staff had predicted a year and a half ago, a year and a half earlier. So cumulatively, Measure O would likely bring in $17 million more than staff anticipated a year prior. When we say cumulatively, we mean over the entire Measure O period, not in 1 year or a couple of years. And so, though the concern about revenue accumulation to cover the debt payments due past the sunset date had waned, the Oversight Committee still directed staff to continue the gradual weaning process because the second purpose, to reabsorb all the ongoing programs gradually, was still relevant. So we took the list of Measure O programs, made sure that we removed all of the one-time programs. So there's only the ongoing programs that need weaning. The one-time programs will just occur and spend down the Measure O amount that they intended to spend down, and then will be closed out. The weaning process is only for ongoing programs, meaning programs that receive additional funds each year. We obviously are only interested in active programs, not ones that are already completed. We don't want to wean the debt. The debt should be paid out of Measure O, and there is a Measure O annual audit that ought to be paid out of Measure O. If you apply all those filters, you're left with 24 Measure O funded programs, and these are the programs that we need to wean. The 24 programs in this fiscal year, in fiscal year 21-22, totaled out to $14,444,517. That is just the amount of the cost of those 24 programs for this fiscal year. So keep in mind that the programs will likely change in cost in upcoming years. The changes are maybe slight costs. We're not expecting anything to double. And those changes are due to, changing employee labor contracts, to retirement cost increases, to contracts negotiated for some of these programs. So the numbers that we put in are numbers based on the fiscal year 21-22 adopted budget, but they may change slightly in the future. And then also, as these projects, programs come due to be weaned, then we would like to do the review and make sure that we are still actually interested in keeping that program and keeping it in its current form. We will have the relevant directors or managers of the program come present to you, present to the council. Everyone will be able to ask questions, and we'll see as we move them to the general fund if it's appropriate to keep them in the same amount that they should have received in the budget for Measure O. So Assuming that the amounts are roughly the same as approved, the target is approximately $1.8 million worth of weaning per year. So there are many, many combinations and ways in which these could be weaned. We are proposing 4 different scenarios for you um, in the interest of beginning this discussion. We are very open to hearing alternative scenarios or combinations of scenarios, and just working with your commission, um, this meeting or the next few meetings, if it takes some time, to really find the ideal way in which to approach this. So scenario one that we propose, I will say staff has no preference or recommendation among the 4 scenarios that we propose. Scenario one is to wean public safety first. And Measure O, as you know, as we've said multiple times, has been the life preserver that saved the city following the 2008 recession. And that included many public safety positions and programs. But for those who wish that Measure O was focused more on, things like recreational programs, park improvements, this approach, scenario one, weans projects that are public safety, meaning police and fire projects, earlier in time, and those are bolded and italicized in this chart. And as you can see, it keeps things like the homework center, the homeless program, the park maintenance for various parks, um, Spanish interpretation, and so forth for the end of Measure O. That means that all of these programs would continue to be paid out of Measure O, and around fiscal year 26, 27, the last public safety program would be out of Measure O. If you prefer this scenario, then you may also want to recommend to the council that in the future, as these programs are weaned and the Measure O balance starts to rise, that they utilize the balance on non-public safety um, programs, one-time projects such as the CIP projects. The next scenario is Weaning Streets Last for those who want to focus Measure O more on streets rehabilitation. So that means that we are weaning in fiscal year 21-22 all the way to fiscal year 27-28, all kinds of other programs, the public safety programs, the homeless programs, the parks rehabilitation, everything else. And we're leaving the weaning of the 2 streets programs, which is the alley and roadway repair, which is bolded, and the ITS annual maintenance, to fiscal year 28-29. That means that throughout the rest of Measure O's life, these 2 programs will be funded by Measure O. The third proposed scenario is to wean full-time equivalent positions first. The Measure O currently pays for 50 full-time equivalent positions. So 50 staff positions are paid for out of Measure O. For those who don't want a sales tax supplement funding employee positions, we've determined which programs, the ones that are bolded, have positions associated with them. And this scenario removes those programs first, such that by fiscal year 26-27, all of the previously funded Measure O positions will have been transferred to the general fund. The remaining programs in the last 2 fiscal years of Measure O are not associated with any employee positions. And then the final scenario that we propose, scenario 4, um, allows you to wean across all 4 Measure O categories. So Measure O has 4 different categories. There's the public safety and gang prevention intervention, which is um, indicated here by the icon of the shield, the public safety shield. There's parks and open space, which you can see has the trees icon. Traffic and road improvements have a street icon, and other community improvements have a plus sign icon. And so we tried to wean the different projects from the different categories across the 8-year schedule rather than taking any one category and weaning it earlier or later than others. You can see on this chart all the different programs with their associated categories. So again, this is not the only way that Measure O weaning schedule can happen. Your commission can select some combination of the options. You can provide an entirely different option for us. You can tell us that you think we should wean faster than the 8 years. And as to the timing of putting together this schedule, we do request that you give us your recommendation to send to council regarding just the first fiscal year indicated, fiscal year 21-22, because we need to take that to council right away, such that whatever the decision is, it's incorporated into the mid-year budget. You can take your time on all the future years recommendations, meaning you can give me some feedback at this coming meeting, and then I can come back to you at the next meeting and we can keep running scenarios until we get your recommendation right. So again, the recommendation is that the committee recommend to the City Council a Measure O weaning schedule, and I'll be happy to answer your questions at the meeting. Thank you.